You are listening to the Small Town Big Talk Show, the weekly podcast for small town people with big dreams and ideas. I'm your host, Rebecca Undum, and each week we'll cover a topic meant to inspire, encourage, and empower you to live big in your small town. Although it has its challenges, nothing beats small town living, and we're committed to sharing the best of what's working in the communities we serve. So enjoy this episode, and we hope it helps you to bloom where you've been planted. Hey, friends of the Small Town Big Talk Show. I am coming at you from, I don't know what day, like 44 or something of quarantine due to coronavirus. And I decided that I would just share a bit of what this time has taught me as a person, as a mom, as a wife, as a small town advocate and cheerleader, a business person. And then also what I think we can look forward to or what hope we can cling to in our small communities. This is such a bizarre time that we're living through, and I have some really exciting interviews to share with you, guests to introduce you to, but it just didn't feel timely. It didn't feel right. And I think there's so much to discuss and so much to learn from this time. And I want to share just some of what that looks like, not just from my own perspective, but also it's kind of a collection of some of the things that I'm picking up and gathering from all the people that I'm still getting to interact with and interface with during this really strange time. Man, all I can say is I'm super thankful for technology. I'm super thankful for Zoom. That's been kind of my primary lifeline to people outside of the four walls of my house and the three little creatures that run around with me all day that I'm trying to keep alive. So let me just share with you what coronavirus has taught me, the lessons I've learned, and the hope that I think we have as people in small towns. So number one, there's 5 lessons, by the way. Number one is to honor your feelings. If you've spent any time with me at all, you know that I think feelings really matter. And it's something that as citizens and people in small communities, we're not particularly adept at. We often have this mindset, and I'm going to say that this is part of the resilience that we have as a community of small town people. We have a grit and we have a perseverance and we have a resilience to difficulty. Being the fifth generation of my family now to farm, I've seen my family and a lot of our local friends and family members that are in farming. I mean, farmers just get it done. You don't spend a lot of time wallowing and you don't spend a lot of time thinking about how difficult things are. We were in a farm crisis before coronavirus hit and people struggle, but people don't wallow. But along with that, I mean, I think I'm not advocating that what we ought to do is wallow. I am advocating that what we ought to do is recognize, and we need to honor it and we need to feel it. So the damage that I think comes from that stoicism of like, we're not feeling anything, we're tough and we don't feel things. It's that our bodies know better and we really can't lie to ourselves. Our bodies were designed to withstand feelings, but if we don't respond or acknowledge, I guess, the feeling, it's not going to just go away on its own. Just because it's difficult and we're trying to avoid it, no matter how that might look for us. And right now, I'll just say that this is a time where I've had a lot of inclinations. And when this first happened, the first couple of weeks of us being quarantined in isolation from one another, I basically tried to avoid the feelings. I didn't spend a lot of time trying to figure out what it was that I was feeling. I didn't spend a lot of time analyzing it or trying to even recognize it or acknowledge it for what it was. I really just spent time trying to avoid it. So doing things like eating them, which seriously, the first couple of weeks of this, I ate my feelings pretty regularly. And then also I drowned it in a tall glass of wine on the regular. And I know there's all these memes about joking about like day drinking, like this is a generation of kids being raised by day drinkers and stuff. And believe me, I have a sense of humor about that. And I of course get a chuckle out of these things, but the truth is numbing those feelings just, for the pure act of avoiding feeling them isn't going to do us any favors. And the feeling will persist one way or the other, and it will settle into our bodies and manifest in some difficult and not helpful way. And along with all of these like observations or just kind of lessons that I've learned, I'm going to also share a question at the end of each of them that you can ask yourself to kind of help put you in the mindset to also learn that lesson if it hasn't become overly abundant to you at this time as well. But basically, the goal is to try to name it, be actually clear about what it is that you're feeling and do that without judgment. It's weird because this is actually the hardest part. We're living in a time where everybody basically thinks it's their human right to tell everyone else how they think they ought to behave, which I find just really gross and repulsive. I'm not finding social media to be all that social, at least positively right now. So your feelings have a purpose, and there's not a single feeling that you're going to experience that's actually bad. It's what we do with them that leads to bad outcomes. So the feeling itself isn't really responsible. So we try to name it, and then we think about what we want to do with it. And like I said, right now, there have been times where I've chosen a not so helpful path, probably numbing it to some degree. But brutal honesty with ourselves is the goal here. And this doesn't mean that you have to get on social media and write like a quote unquote vulnerability post or like #vulnerable. Like, ugh. We're talking about just being honest with ourselves, being honest with the person that you have to spend all your time with right now. It's strange that we're all feeling a level of grief. I actually now know somebody who lost a close loved one to COVID-19. And up until just about a week ago, I hadn't. Listening to this friend of mine talk about the inability to be with her loved one, just it's horrifying. So there's grief that losing a loved one is a grief that always exists, but it's strange because right now we're all collectively experiencing some level of grief. And I think we jump to this tendency to want to minimize our own pain because it doesn't hold a candle to losing a loved one, right? And I just don't know why we have that inclination to do that. I'm not a scientist. I'm not a therapist. I'm not a researcher. But this is an observation that you can see where we're quick to kind of brush off or minimize our own pain because it's not as significant as somebody else's. And pain is pain. And the feelings that are associated with that pain is legit. Those feelings are legitimate. Grief comes and goes. It comes in waves. Anybody that's actually lost someone that they love dearly knows that one day you might go a good part of a day without thinking about it. And then the next day, it's like every little thing triggers that feeling again. And we're all going through a part of that right now. So it's like as if our own challenging feelings weren't enough. We're also exposed to this, again, societal kind of social media pressure to prove who cares the most about people. It's just so much to process right now, guys. So it's no wonder that we're all maybe you're not feeling unhinged. I am definitely feeling a little unhinged. Just earlier today, I cried like a fool watching a video that our elementary teaching staff made for our kids. It was creative and it was endearing and like my throat is catching just thinking about it. It was not the video that brought on these feelings. I mean, it was a very sweet video. But if I'm honest with myself, it's just, I suddenly am like, I just want to be able to do the things we always did. I want to hug people that I love. I want to have random little adventures that involve us going into stores and exploring things and supporting businesses the way we always knew how to support them. It's okay, I think, to feel that way. And it doesn't always feel like it is because we get into that comparative grief thing. But I literally ugly cried over that today. And I don't need to feel shame about that because that's certainly not going to help. So I bring up feelings because there's a lot of feelings swirling. And then there's that weird feeling of like, is something wrong with me? Because I'm not feeling that much about it. Like a lot of people are feeling relatively unaffected. And to that I say, good for you, like legitimately good for you. So we just have to learn how to honor our own feelings. And then while we're doing that, of course, extend the grace to everybody else. So the question that you can ask to maybe tune in a little bit better to your own feelings is really just this: how am I feeling, really? And then just as I hate it when I see us using the phrase, how are you doing? Hey, how are you? Casually when we're walking by somebody and we don't actually stop to listen. That's a major pet peeve of mine. And it has been for a long, long time. I don't know when we decided to use how you doing or how are you as like a flippant greeting, because if we ask the question, we should want to know the answer. If we don't have time to hear the answer, we shouldn't ask the question. So just like you would, if you were going to ask that important question of a good friend, we need to slow down and take the time to listen to our own response to that question. So the first thing that I've learned is that it's okay and important to honor our feelings during this time. And then this leads into number 2, which is that you're not somehow doing Corona wrong. Okay. There is no one right way to do this. Nobody knows what the hell they're doing. So there's no right answer here. As with all heated and controversial topics, it seems like all of a sudden out of the woodwork comes all the experts. They're vying for control, not just of the narrative, but of the right to say that they somehow have the corner on how to do it right. And very few things are really that straightforward. And we've been told that this is unprecedented. Everybody uses that word this time that we're going through. So it's insane for anybody to believe that they actually have discovered the answer or the way through this. Right now, if you dive into social media and you explore it completely unchecked, it's going to lead you to feeling like you're not doing enough and you're not doing it right. So no two people are experiencing this time exactly the same way. It is really important to consider that. And again, it kind of goes back to the amount of time I spent on number 1 is because your feelings matter, as do the feelings of everybody else. And if we can just get to a place where we're not so quick to actually judge what we're seeing, hearing, and even feeling in ourselves, I just think that's the grace that we need right now more than ever. So a helpful question that you can ask yourself, and I'm going to say the people in your church, like if you're a parent and you are responsible for helping guide people through this time, a great question you can ask is, well, what would make me feel better about all of this? That's because it's okay to seek out ways to feel better. Maybe it is going for a walk. Maybe it is unplugging from social media. Maybe in this case, it is that glass of wine, or it is eating a whole, a piece of cake, a bite of cake is different than eating a whole cake to avoid feeling something else. It's okay if things that are quote unquote unhealthy comfort you right now. There's nothing wrong with that. It's only when we're doing it to avoid things that it becomes what I would consider to be a problem. And not just me, like most experts, I think would agree, right? So taking care of ourselves is important right now, and seeking out ways to make yourself feel some joy and search for the joy in the midst of all this difficulty doesn't make you insensitive. And it doesn't mean that you're lacking in empathy. And that's where this comparing our grief to other people is just so dangerous, because we don't help other people get through their grief better by minimizing ours. That doesn't actually serve anybody. So again, it's okay to feel what you're feeling, and it's okay to seek out ways to feel better. Nobody knows what the hell that they're doing. Okay, nobody. Number 3, like I said, if you spent any time listening to this talk show, you can look back at a lot of the episodes. We talk about feelings. I think it's one of the things that as small communities, I hope we can all become a little more in touch with how we really feel about things, because I think then it also creates a path forward to communicate through those feelings, because we're human beings first, right? Before any other role that we play. So, I think they matter, right? I talk about them all the time. And I think it's important for us to learn how to sit with that difficulty. But I have to admit, like, I'm pretty damn pragmatic. And at some point, I get just antsy and I want to move again. And by move, I don't just mean physically, but that was a huge part of it for me. I think this is like, we're entering like the 5th or almost 6th week, maybe 5th, probably solid week of this. And I can tell you it's about week 3. The first 2 weeks, I was just a freaking mess. And I cried a lot, like out of nowhere. I would just feel overwhelmed. And I had actual moments of dread where I thought, oh my God, our life is never going to be the same. And I'm going to come back to that because I think there's actually some truth to it. But about week 3, I thought, okay, so now what? This feeling of wanting to move, like, again, kind of collectively, that big old wheel of progress, it just grinded to a halt. And I think we all get that it requires movement to get them turning again. And I think we're all feeling that antsiness that we're all kind of feeling to kind of get back to things. That I think is something to explore. So I think this is a beautiful time. The lesson is that we've got time to recommit to our mission or our values. I would suggest both. Mission is really more for people that maybe have a business or again, a community mindset maybe would be kind of mission driven, but personal values are something that we should be really taking another look at. So one of the things I've learned during this time is, as I'm thinking about, okay, so when all of this happened, I have a speaking business. My speaking business basically screeched to a complete halt. The events that were on the books all got canceled. And I was also trying to launch this nonprofit. And I've told you guys quite a bit about it. And the first two big things with this nonprofit were slated to be live in-person events. And I couldn't do them. I mean, it was like I could hear like just the screech of the brakes. It felt like I could hear it, and it was deafening. But now that I know that we are going to be living in a world that looks vastly different from how it did before, I really, truly do believe that. It has really given me some clarity about what I care about, what matters to me. And that's giving me pause, making me think about how I want to re-engage with the world when I'm free to do so. So in the show notes, I'm going to link to a couple of documents, and there are two different sets of what we call value exercises. I've talked about this before on the talk show, and essentially the goal is so there's two sets. One is kind of a personal, individual, or / family. I would just say kind of the personal side, a set of values. And the other document is for companies, businesses, if you have a business of your own. So corporate, but that just means organizational values. And I think this is an exercise that's really important for every single person to have a set of personal values identified for themselves. What is it that drives you? What do you really care about? And what does that look like for you? We have a little more time on our hands. And in some respects, it's weird because my life is technically less full than ever before because like we're always home. But I also find it very hard to focus because, as you know, I have 3 little kids home with me, and we're trying to get their schooling done in the midst of salvaging a business and all that stuff. So it is very challenging, right? And so again, like a nod to all the parents that are home trying to balance all of that. It's just absolutely no joke. But because you're not overwhelmed with your typical schedule, you've got time. We've all got some time to do a little bit of reflection. And I think that's a beautiful use of this downtime, if you will. And so the links to these 2 documents, you're going to find like a set of values. None of them are bad. All of them are worthy. And there may be things that you actually care about deeply that you can't find the word, and that's okay. It's just to get you thinking about what your top 3 values are. Now, this is something that I recommend people do at least once a year. And the reason for it is that it helps you set boundaries of time, things that you're going to say yes to, things that you're going to say no to, the people that you choose to work with, the opportunities that you choose to pursue or not pursue. Having a clear set of values helps you make choices. It helps you set priorities. So for me, I have 3 values. I do this at least once a year, and they keep coming back to the same 3 things. And they are freedom, fun, and communication. Now that doesn't sound, there's nothing sexy about my values, but no matter how I come back to it, these are the 3 things that like drive my decision-making. Freedom just means that I have some element of control over when I have to be there, who I get to choose to work with. And that's why really, no matter how dire things get financially, me going to work straight up for somebody else, it just seems like such an impossibility. Unless they'd be like the most flexible boss ever humanly, like ever to exist. But freedom, I enjoy. And that also means that there's like a lack of a routine sometimes, which also challenges me. But I like that feeling of freedom, having some choice and some say over what I do, when I do it, and who I do it with. Fun is really important to me. If I don't truly find it enjoyable, then why am I intentionally choosing it? Now, this rubs some people the wrong way in terms of service, because there are some things that aren't fun and I do them anyway, but there's some deeper meaning that's connected back to that, right? I'm talking about like literally saying yes when you want to say no. And that would be a complete violation of one of my values. And the third one is communication, just meaning that I only really want to work with people that tell me the truth, organizations that are open and transparent. And if I have a difficult time navigating the communication in a meeting, in a place, you're just probably not the group for me. And that's really, really important. So back to okay, so here we are in coronavirus. Everything I thought I was going to do, especially to launch my nonprofit, can't happen the way I thought it was going to. So that means, and we're going to get to this in a second too, that means I have to really start thinking creatively, right? Like, okay, so what can I do? And I'm going to come back to this. But here's one of the things that kind of recommitting to my values has reminded me is that I don't have to chase down partners like from a the startup of this nonprofit, I'm looking at sponsorship. I'm looking at partnership opportunities with companies, with businesses, and with individual people. I don't have to chase the people that just don't get it. That sounds so obvious, but before it was more like, but they'd be such an important key group to get this. And I've had a couple of organizations that I present the information to them. It's everything they do, at least on paper, lines up perfectly with what we're trying to achieve, right? They're like, it just feels like, how are we not checking all the boxes? But there is something missing. They just don't get it, right? And what I'm realizing is that now, to get this thing off the ground, I have to be willing to say, look, guys, I'm heading in a direction. If you see it and you want to be a part of it, I'm literally going to yell, climb aboard. Like, join me. Come on. We're going to have a great time. I'm so excited to have you on board. For those that don't, it's literally like, hi, I see you there. You're standing in my way. Like, could you step aside? I need to get through. And I don't need to feel bad about that. And so I think that's a huge lesson for me and it's come from the recommitment to my values and the mission. If you have a business, you started your business for a reason. Tether yourself back into what it is that you're trying to accomplish, why you started it, who you want to serve. And truly, it's going to make a huge difference once we're able to re-engage and the economy kind of opens back up. That's a lesson from this time, is that I think a lot of us are like, God, were we spending time on things that we didn't need to? So take some time, get clear on your values. So the questions you'll ask yourself if you pull up either of those documents is, what do I really care about? And how will I be different going forward because of this time spent being a little bit more reflective? I can't wait to hear what you guys come up with for that. Okay, number 4, look for opportunities. So like I said, I can't host in-person events anymore. As a person and a business owner, it's really important for us, like I said, to reach down, tether, ground ourselves back into that mission and that purpose. Our service and our offerings maybe even aren't going to look like they once did. And we need to honestly prepare our hearts that they may never look exactly the way they did before. That's been another kind of wave of the grief that I know I have felt. My entire business is built around hosting and or speaking at in-person gatherings. And the truth is, it could be a very, very long time before we get to do that the way we did it before. So once you can find some acceptance, and that's why it's kind of a grieving, right? Like it's denial, like it's going to be fine. We'll open up in a month. Like I think a lot of us maybe had that feeling. The whole stage, you go through the stages and sometimes you have to revisit a stage, all of that. But once you find some clarity around that, you're going to have to realize that there's still a way for you to serve. And it just maybe isn't going to look exactly like it did before. So I have a few questions that can kind of spur this on for you, especially if you're a business owner right now, is what do what do we have going for us? What are our assets? What are the things that already we can steward well because they're assets to us? What do we have going for us? The second is, what can I do right now with what I have? So looking at those assets, how do we maybe use them differently than we have in the past? This is where, creativity, if there was ever a time for innovation and out of the box thinking and cracking our minds open just a bit, this is the time. And I'm kind of getting ahead of myself here, but small towns, we do this. This is who we are. So we were positioned and primed for a time such as this. And I know it doesn't always feel like that, but it's true. Who can I serve is a question. Just looking for ways to do something that ties to your overall purpose. And again, if you have to know your values, you have to know your mission before you can look for those specific opportunities. There's nothing wrong with random acts of kindness just for being a good person. That's awesome. But a way to continue to make it feel like you're having some momentum and you're not completely losing all hope for forward progress and movement in your business, it's looking for ways to serve that tie back to your mission. And then the last is just what's possible now that wasn't before. I don't know if you've experienced that, but I feel like I have. There are people using tools, these technology tools that you would have never been able to get them to do it. They've been forced. And I don't want that to be the way that people learn, is to like push them off a cliff basically and say, okay, create some wings. It's okay. You're falling now. So figure out how you're going to fly. Like that's not That's not the preferred way, is to create so much tension and stress around learning. But if we're honest, this is what learning always looks like. It's trying something, failing, and like falling forward as we're doing it, right? That's what learning always looks like. So I encourage you to think about for yourself what's possible now that didn't really exist before. And I bet if you spend some time thinking about it, there's something that you can grab onto. All right, number 5, nurture what you already have. This has happened to me personally several times in the past, and I honestly can't overstate how helpful this idea is. You know, this whole COVID-19 thing, my speaking business came to a halt. And again, not to mention my nonprofit startup. And, you know, I felt a lot of sense of fear and a lack. I had a sense of lack, like, how am I going to pay my bills? Where am I going to replace the revenue from? All of those things. I mean, those are legitimate things. And anytime we feel that scarcity, fear tends to walk hand in hand with that. And so for me, one of the easiest ways, and this is going to sound very woo, but I think it's not woo, it's about energy and where energy goes and where it flows and what comes back to us from that intention. I think one of the easiest ways to remind myself of the abundance of the universe, especially when I'm feeling lack or scarcity, is to dig down deep and take care of the things that I've already been entrusted with. There's something very expansive about intentionally nurturing what we already have. I almost feel like it sends a message to the universe saying, like, I steward things well, so you can trust me with more, because look at the way I take care of what you hand me and what you give me. And I mean, even just think about the energy of putting out that message of, you can trust me with the gifts. You can trust me with the opportunities because I will take care of them. So all this time being cooped up at home, I've spent a lot of time in our yard. Okay, so mowing and like trimming trees. And I'm not going to lie, like there's some enormous satisfaction in manning a chainsaw at a time such as this. My son was out there with me and we were being safe and all the things. But like we're like sawing off whole branches and they just crash down on the ground. And I look at my son and I'm like, how satisfying is that? And he said, pretty satisfying. And he was just there to watch them fall. So I will say, maybe go find yourself a chainsaw. That's not podcast advice you hear all the time. But we've been like tending to our perennials and tending to our shrubs. And the time and the labor that I've spent on our yard so far, I mean, it's not even May 1st yet. It like completely so far surpasses what I usually do at this point in the spring. There has been something super sacred about taking such care. I'm not doing it because I'm bored. I am doing it with the intention of, how do I take care of this gift that I've been given that provides me and my family so much joy? Also, I would say that I feel like, although I was never meant to teach my own children, that's why I can't wait to put them back in the care of their actual teachers. I do think that this has been a time of nurturing my kids in a different way. It's not easy and it hasn't been easy, but I do think that there is some intentional nurturing going on, and this stuff is just sacred. So we can think about this on a family or individual level, you know, like I just shared, with something as simple as like the yard. Maybe you're going to do a house project. Maybe you're finally going to fix all the things that were broken in your home, something like that. But we can definitely think about this as a business owner. You've been entrusted as the steward of your business, of your ideas, of your offers, of your service. And that's something to really think about, like, how can I nurture it? And then we can also broaden this to think about our community too, right? What do we have? What have we been entrusted to? What boards do we serve on? And how can we show up for those groups right now? So the question that accompanies this nurture what you already have concept is just, what can I take care of today? And perhaps maybe, friend, it's you. And I appreciate that too. I don't ever want to be like, stop thinking about yourself and just nurture everybody else. That's never going to be my message. This is assuming that you have done the hard work that we talked about at the beginning, where you are fully in acknowledgement and awareness and recognition of where you're personally at, how you actually feel. Because these other things really can't happen. We might do them to busy ourselves, because that's another thing that people do to avoid feeling things, is they busy themselves with crap. And they say, I'm serving other people, I'm serving other people. And you can just see it, right? Where you want to say, I really think you're just avoiding feeling anything. It eventually catches up to us. It always does. So please know that when I say, what can I take care of today? It should never come at the expense of yourself, your sanity, your wholeness, your well-being. You have to take care of you to be of good service and stewardship to other people. All right. So those are the lessons. Those are the things that I have observed. Those are the things that I've picked up from the conversations I've been having with people during this really challenging time. So what does this all mean for small towns, right? Like, what's the hope that we can cling to? There are three things that have become just completely like apparent to me during this time. And I think it can be something that we can be hopeful about. The first thing is just that we really do have more freedom in a small town. And I don't think we always see ourselves that way. I told you that freedom is one of my primary values. I don't think we always see small communities as being more free. But friends, we have freedom. I know that I said it at least 10 times with various groups on Zoom calls, how thankful I am to have experienced this unprecedented time in my small town in Oaks, North Dakota. We still get to see people while we're out on walks. And by see them, I just mean when we're out on a walk, most of the cars that drive by are filled with people we know. We are still finding a way to stay connected to people because we don't have to try as hard. It just organically happens if people are out at all. And they're not long, and it's not the same as hugging them. It's not the same as like spending real time with them. But I just think that is one of the major gifts that we have in a small community. And then, we need to be honest, like we have open space to facilitate that better mental well-being. But then in that wide open space where we're just out getting fresh air and having the space to do it, we also get those precious moments of connection that people living in apartments in large cities, they just don't have. So we're actually showing people at this time the true beauty of small town living. And that's something to celebrate. Praise hands, alleluia, amen, celebrate. The second thing is that in a small community, we can pivot faster. With less people, there's just less red tape. And I am not saying that our small towns operate without challenges, okay? We have politics, we have bureaucracy, just like a bigger city, but we're able to implement things more quickly. And that's really a huge advantage at a time like this. We're at a time where really innovation and collaboration are going to be a couple of themes that prove out the winners, the people that are going to thrive through this time. And small towns can not only make those connections really quickly and partner up quickly, but we can also implement things fast. And it makes a huge difference when you're trying to innovate and you're trying to lead change. Having a whole bunch of people that have to either be in the know or be a part of it, it slows things down. So we should be thankful for how fewer people actually serves us in this way. And then third, people now actually get in a really visceral way that they can work from absolutely anywhere. So why wouldn't we want to capitalize on the fact that they can enjoy the simplicity of the pace of life in a small town and still have that meaningful career? I think we should prepare ourselves for the reality that there's a lot of people that may not fully return to office life like they had before, and that they may want this mix of freedom of remote working. And in small towns, this is co-working is one of the things that we hope to offer in our innovation lab at 510 Main Street in Oaks, North Dakota, Main Avenue in Oaks, North Dakota. As small towns, we need to be thinking about how we can capitalize on that, how we can accommodate that. So the big picture, what's the hope for small communities? We might see a resurgence. And, I get it, we may not, but I think people might realize just how blessed those of us in small towns are to have lived through this time with more freedom than our friends in larger communities. And as small towns, I think we should think about what that could mean for us and whether or not we're prepared to step up and be the kind of community that's going to welcome people. Are we the kind of community where people would want to relocate to? Are we acknowledging that this trend is now a trend that everybody to some degree probably has experienced? And are we ready to offer a space or offer the amenities that would support a choice like that? Ultimately, like with any difficult time, we can and we will grow from this. And we know it that we grow through times of adversity. We get stronger through times of adversity. And in small towns, we've always been resilient and tough. This is who we've always been. And we're going to come through this stronger than ever before. And honestly, as much as, these are just my observations, I do want to hear from you. I encourage you to join us on Facebook. We have a closed Facebook group called Live Big in a Small Town, where I would love, and we've been having some dialogue about what's working, what's not working during this really difficult time. And I think here in North Dakota, we may be coming on the end of the full business restriction. Don't really know for sure. At the time of this recording, we'll have a press conference here later today where I think we're going to get some more guidance on that. But we are not through the woods in terms of the uncertainty. So if there was ever a time to get comfortable with being uncomfortable, it's now. And I just want you to know that I'm praying for every single one of you. Literally, I'm praying for your small towns. I'm praying for your sanity. I'm praying for your well-being. I'm praying for the people that are sick. I'm praying for you and always cheering you on. As our communities restart and our economies kind of restart, I'm here to cheerlead with you. I'm here to encourage you. And I really do want to hear what's working for you, because we have this incredible opportunity in small towns to create a whole new future. And that's the hope that we have during this time. Thank you guys again for listening. Thank you for always supporting this talk show, and stay safe and stay well and stay connected, friends, until we talk again. Thanks for listening to this week's episode of the Small Town Big Talk Show. If you enjoyed today's show, we invite you to subscribe on Stitcher, Spotify, or Apple Podcasts, and we'd love for you to leave us a 5-star review. The more reviews we get, the easier it will be for other small town friends to find us. We encourage you to keep on living big in your small town, because the size of your life is not determined by your zip code.